go ahead and get started. You can pass your 10-page research papers forward.
Okay.
My assistant Annie will collect them and correct them, and I'll get the credit. So let me begin by just saying that there's there's no way that we can adequately cover everything that needs to be talked about today, because I do a full day workshop on this, and I'm cramming it into 1 hour. So there's a lot I'm leaving out, and we're not going to look at any statistics, and we're not going to look at any Bible, because I'm assuming that you have read your Bible, and you've already seen that God does not like slavery. And so what we're going to talk about specifically is about church mobilization. And so I'm going to start off really wide and narrow it down. And the narrow down will be, I'll have Annie come up and speak about specifically what she and Ginger are doing in Greenville, Illinois. I'm working at the 10,000 foot level. I'm working internationally. I'm working with partners. I'm working with universities. But I don't work with survivors at all. But Annie and Ginger work with survivors, and they're working right on it. They're doing boots on the ground type of thing. And I want to go over some basic things at the beginning, kind of narrow the funnel, and then we'll have a little bit of time for conversation. You can sit down until I call on you. Awesome. The Set Free movement, let me just go back to this. The Set Free movement began because my denomination, the Free Methodist Church, in 2007 met here on the campus of Spring Arbor University for our general conference. Everybody came together for a variety of different reasons, and one of the things that we did was we looked at modern day slavery, and they passed a very strong resolution against modern slavery. And the Free Methodist Church began as a hi, come on in. Come on in. The Free Methodist Church began in the 19th century because of freedom issues, and that's why we're called Free Methodists. In 2007, we said, okay, slavery, we acknowledge that it's here in our world, let's do something about it. In 2009, they created a missionary position, and I am a missionary for the Free Methodist Church working to end modern slavery. Like, that's my job. My job is to end modern slavery and mobilize churches and work in partnership with what's already going on. Now, out of that grew, it became really hard for me to continually say, I'm a Free Methodist missionary working to end modern slavery. So, what are we going to call ourselves? And eventually, I'm making some long story short, but we took the name the Set Free Movement. And I'm the director of the Set Free Movement. And I work with universities and partners around the world and churches around the world. And then Annie and Ginger work directly in one localized area doing mobilization. So this is a great opportunity for the two of us to give you two very different kind of points of view. And we're speaking from our perspective, which is the only one that we know. So you'll be able to take some things and reject some other things, that's fine. The mission statement of the Set Free Movement is that the Set Free Movement champions holistic freedom and seeks to create new futures for survivors and those vulnerable to modern slavery. Now, I want you to notice that the mission statement is a hope-oriented mission statement. It's not a despair-oriented mission statement. The mission statement does not say there are 27 million slaves in the world today and they're suffering and it's horrible and we need to do something about it, and so let's get really depressed and go out and do something. It's about holistic freedom. We want to see people set free physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. And we see that as integrally related to all the areas of justice. So where you have poverty and abuse and human trafficking, we've got to address it all. So we really work with a wide variety of partners trying to create some holistic solutions. And we want to create new futures. We can't just end modern slavery. We have to create new futures. Now, the first plenary this morning was fabulous. I wanted to keep jumping up and saying, hey, can I make a theological point here? Can I talk about the church here? Because she was really priming what we're talking about today. She said you move from a victim to a survivor to a thriver. That's another way of saying what I'm trying to say here, which is we want to champion holistic freedom for those who are vulnerable and survivors, and we want to create new futures. That's the thriver piece. So it's just a different terminology. And I think this is very important. This is a movement of hope. This is not a movement of despair. This is a movement of hope because we have God in our lives. We are agents of hope and healing. And so there's no room for despair. And sometimes it's hard, sometimes it's depressing, yeah, but never despair. If you're around us very long, you'll hear us saying these things. End modern slavery, create new futures, be an agent of hope and healing. The reality is that we in this room are among the most powerful people on the planet. We all have eaten today. We all can read and write. We have the freedom to be in this place. We have incredible power just in who we are as Americans or Canadians. Sorry. As Americans or Canadians. And then you add to that we have God in our lives. We have Jesus who rose from the dead. We have the Holy Spirit. And we truly are an unstoppable force. And the only thing stopping ourselves is ourselves. In reality, it really, we stop ourselves more often than not. So we are agents of hope and healing. The core values of the Set Free movement are that we are committed to holistic freedom. We are committed to a special preference for the poor. We are committed to collaborative partnerships. We're committed to community-based activism, and we're committed to smart action. Yes?
Is there a website where we can go to print stuff up?
Yeah, all of this is on this website in some form or another. You can pick up more of these cards. And it's all about mobilization, partnership, and transformation. Mobilization, partnership, and transformation. Let's talk just a little bit about some of the stages of how this has worked and how I'm seeing it working a lot. We have an awakening. I was a missionary in Thailand for 7 years, and I had an awakening. I was seeing modern slavery, and it woke me up. I was in northern Thailand, and I took this picture of this little Burmese boy and learned that you can buy this boy for about $5 US. That was an awakening for me. And it created an emotion. Emotions are energy in motion. That's what emotion is. So it created an energy inside of me that said, this is unacceptable. Because people are not things, and no child should be being sold for $5. That's crazy. And that awakening and that emotion creates a positive or a negative action. And we have to ask about our actions. Are they sustainable? Are they effective? Are they community-based? Is it just me as an individual going out to do something on my own? Like for me, what I did when I was awakened and I had this energy in motion, it created one specific action where I went to my supervisors and I said, hey, we're Free Methodists. I thought we took care of this in the 19th century. I'm seeing slavery on a regular basis. What are we going to do? And what that did is it created a community-based, effective, sustainable action over several years. It created this incredible catalytic action. I'll tell you another story. I was at Spring Arbor Free Methodist Church just across the street 3 years ago, and I spoke to the youth group. And the youth group had an awakening. And some of those youth, Libby and Sarah Ellis and Ashley Ganton, when I was done with the presentation to the youth group, they all came up afterwards and were asking me questions, and they said, can we go to another room? So we went to another room, we went for 2 more hours of talking. And they asked the question, what can we do? What can we do about modern slavery? And my question back to them was, well, what are you already doing? Who are you? Who are you as a youth group? Whatever you do it in the direction of freedom. And they were all athletes. So they said, well, we run. Well, then why don't you run? So they ran. They ran. They did a 5K run and they raised $5,000. The next year they did another run and they raised another $5,000. The third year they raised another $5,000. So there was an awakening, there was an energy that went into motion, and then it created this thing that happened. And it created a catalytic chain of events. Because not only did they run, but other people started running and walking. And so you have little Mariah and little Micah, and little Mariah was 5 years old when she did a walk for freedom. They got the idea from Spring Arbor. And they did this walk for freedom. And little Mariah came home and she had an awakening. And she prayed, "Dear Jesus, thank you that we're free to walk and run and ride our bikes. We're sad that you're sad that there are slaves. Help me to do something." Little Mariah then went to Sunday school the next Sunday, and she gathered all of her little 5- and 6-year-old friends together, and they prayed for the end of slavery. And she did that week after week after week. Then she was in preschool, and they were learning to count to 100. Very exciting. They had the 100-day celebration. And the teacher said, "What would you do if I gave you $100? And little Mariah said, "I would use it to free slaves." And when I preached in her church and I told that story, people started giving her $100 bills. 2 weeks ago, I preached, I told her story, and somebody came up and said, "Give this money to Mariah." And they gave me $100. I was preaching in Northern California about a year ago. Somebody came up and said, "Here, give this to Mariah." And when I opened up the check later, it was a check for $700. So when I was in Phnom Penh, Cambodia, and I met with the Garden of Hope, and they had just rescued 3 8-year-old girls out of slavery, and they didn't know how they were going to pay their electric bills, I said, "Well, little Mariah has money for you." And I got out my wallet, and I gave them Mariah's money. And I gave it away in Nepal, and I've got more money. I'm going to Greece in 2 weeks, and I'm taking Mariah's money with me. Now that's a 5-year-old girl who's now 8. And here she is. This picture was taken 3 weeks ago. She's still riding her scooter for freedom. Whatever you can do, you do it in the direction of freedom. Vision produces an action, and we often stop there. But the action has to be followed through with a transformation. That vision and action combining together create a personal and a society, community transformation. So really what we're trying to do is not just end modern day slavery. We want individuals, families, communities, and the world to be transformed. And not only transformation, we don't end there either. We want to create a new culture. A new culture where people are valued, where justice rolls like a mighty river, where people are not treated like things. Culture is what is our language and our items, the different physical representations of our culture. This is really long-lasting and a powerful transformation. So we don't just end with vision, we don't just end with action, we don't just end with transformation, we also create a new culture. So we're looking at changing the world here, is what we're really talking about. And the church is the only organization that has the power to challenge and change the values and worldviews of our society. Law and government won't do it, business won't do it. The church is the only one that has that power. And we need two approaches happening on the same time, and that's why we're balanced really well here. We need boots on the ground approaches, which are Annie and Ginger, going into the prison, going to the truck stops, working to mobilize their community, strategizing to create a safe house, and we need an upstream 10,000-foot level work. So we need both of those operating. Some of the elements of mobilization are that we need to cast a vision, we need to get the energy in motion, we need a theological foundation, we need functional structures. Who's going to do what, when, where, how? It was funny, when Ginger was here, I don't know specifically how you operate, but I'm ready, shoot, aim. And Ginger is ready, 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 ready. Aim, 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 aim. Let me check, am I ready? Have I aimed? Now shoot. So Ginger and I really balance each other out very well. That's that functional structures. Smart, is it smart? Is it effective? Is it sustainable? I've heard heartbreaking stories of churches that have mobilized and they've raised a lot of money and they launch a safe house and it's only in existence for 6 months. Because it wasn't sustainable, it wasn't effective, it wasn't smart, they didn't have functional structures.
Earlier you mentioned that on the first part where you need that awakening produces the emotion and that either positive or negative, and then you mentioned 3 things and I didn't get the third one. That it needed to be community-based, sustainable, and what was the third one at the earlier beginning? I'm sorry.
Was it on my slides?
Yes.
Effective.
That one. Effective. Okay, so effective was back there also.
Effective, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So these are some of the elements of what I would say are really important to think through when you're doing church mobilization. You know, you just kind of make a checklist. Like, you can't just have emotion, obviously. You can't just have vision. You need to have theological foundations. And you know, this is one of the big motivators is that, you know, it was kind of funny. I was actually at Greenville College a couple of years ago. I shouldn't have said the name right then. Oh well. And I asked us a room of 50 young people. I said, "What was going on when Jesus was crucified?" And somebody said, "Good Friday." And I said, "Well, yeah, that's what we call it now. But what was going on?" None of these young people could tell me what was going on. And I think our churches have forgotten that Jesus was killed during the very time when all of the people were remembering that once they were slaves in the land of Egypt. And that when we celebrate communion, that it is about Jesus. The Lord's Supper, communion, the Eucharist is about Jesus, but it's about more than Jesus. It goes back to the Passover. We are remembering that once we were slaves in the land of Egypt, and that God wants to set us all free. And we have forgotten that. That's an important theological foundation. Now, those are all really broad strokes, but now I want to get a little bit narrower. The end goal of what we want after the church, you get the church mobilization and the community mobilization, is to tap into the influencers of society. And the first plenary this morning, what was her name? What was her name? Celia. She set this up perfectly because she went through every single one of these. It was brilliant. I wanted to stand up and say, yeah! And this is the church has all of these elements. On Sunday morning, tomorrow morning, at the Free Methodist Church across the street, every one of these elements will be represented. So if we can tap into the church, we tap into all the influencers of society. So we've got law and government. We can't just have good laws. If we only have good laws, we'll only be as strong as our weakest point. We've got to also have good healthcare solutions. And we've got to have media. We've got to tell the stories. We've got to show the pictures, tell the stories. That's you, Kelsey. I saw you tap her and say, of course, faith, we're all in here. Business solutions. You know, a couple of examples of that are Heavenly Treasures. This is the Heavenly Treasures anti-trafficking measures. They're working with livelihood groups in different parts of the world, helping them to create really high crafted, beautiful items that we can buy, and when we buy them, it actually helps to free slaves. So you got Heavenly Treasures. You got Camino Island Coffee. Camino Island Coffee was started by a guy that worked with Paul Newman, the Paul Newman Company. And they employ 24,000 farmers growing shade-grown organic coffee. It's really good. So if you buy this coffee, it helps 24,000 farmers, and then they give 10% of the proceeds to Annie and I so that we can come and be with people like you. So these kinds of solutions are really, really important. And we could go on and on. There's some other great ones like Thistle Farms in Nashville, who has their own social enterprise that actually produces about 70% of their financial need. So instead of going out and raising $3 or $4 million a year, Thistle Farms created a social enterprise so that they have most of that already raised. So we need to have all of these elements involved. And I want to give you a very concrete example of this. I'm going to skip through this. In one generation in Great Britain, it went from slavery fully engaged and accepted to being outlawed, and the merchant marines were set loose to go and track down the slave ships and arrest the bad guys and set the slaves free. In one generation. Now, how did that happen? It started with a handful of Quakers in an upper room praying. And these Quakers were praying and asking God, what is the solution to slavery? And God said, quit eating sugar. Because sugar was planted, harvested, and transported by slaves. And so they got their friends to quit eating sugar, and their other friends to quit eating sugar, and their other friends to quit eating sugar. And pretty soon it put economic pressure upon Great Britain, and they had to address that problem. Because our money is very powerful. So you have a business solution that a faith community participated in. And then an artist came along and drew the inside of a slave ship. That's why we need artists like this woman right here that are creating art that opens up our eyes to see things in a different way, to see the possibility, to see what's there. Somebody drew this picture, and they had never seen this before, and it opened up people's eyes, and they thought, that's horrible, that these slaves are just chained up, one after another, and on top of each other. Then a parliamentarian came along, William Wilberforce, that started to work with law and government. And then some musicians came along and started writing songs like Amazing Grace and Can It Be? And did you know that O Holy Night was banned? When it was originally written, it was banned because it was an abolitionist agitator song. And I think God has such a great sense of humor, because this Christmas Eve, all around the world, we will all sing this song in every language imaginable. We will all sing this song to welcome the Prince of Peace, who died on a cross on the very day that everybody's remembering they were once slaves in the land of Egypt. And the third stanza says, chains shall he break, for the slave is our brother, and in his name all oppression shall cease. And we sing it every Christmas Eve. And it's an abolitionist song. Jesus came to set us free. Every branch of society has got to engage. Now, who's doing this? Spring Arbor University is doing this. We have students engaging in every single one of these disciplines. So it's absolutely vital that the university grabs a hold of this and says, we're going to do something about this. And it's delightful for me to be here after 2 years of talking about it. And you know, here we've got a conference, and it's at a university campus, and we've got the faith community involved in this conference, because all these people are in church on Sunday morning, and all these people are getting trained by our universities. Now, I'm going to go over this really fast, and then Annie's going to come and show us how this works. Ready, Annie? I created this about just a few months ago. I was trying to write down and figure out, what in the world are we doing? What are we doing? How are we doing it? How do I communicate this? And when I was done doing this, I thought, that's what they're doing in Greenville. It's like this whole thing is like the Greenville model. And I didn't tell them to do it this way, but God knew, and God created this model. We start here with prayer and formation. We start here with prayer. Now, what we want to do is we want to pray, and then we want to run over and create a solution. Don't do that. Don't do that. This is the difference between mission and program. This kind of action produces a program. We're going to pray about it. We think we know what to do. Let's create a program. And then that program may never ever be created again, may never be done again. It may be effective or not effective. Programs aren't bad, but programs need to serve the mission. And the mission is the most important thing. This creates a mission, and it creates a community. So you begin with prayer, and then you move up to asking questions and exploring. What is going on? What's the teenage dropout rate in your community? What's the racial makeup? Where are the hot spots? Is there a big drug problem? Are there gangs? What are the police telling you? Who's doing soup kitchens? Is the Salvation Army there? You need to ask a lot of questions about your community and find out what's going on. And ask questions about your faith community. Who is in our church? Is there a nurse? Are there police officers? Is there state police? Are there artists? Are there songwriters? Who is in our community that could be deployed at some point? So you ask a lot of questions, then you move over to dialogue and network. So you start dialoguing with all of these people and all these things that you find. So you go in and you talk to the chief of police. You invite the high school principal. We have a high school principal here at our conference today from one of the high schools in Jackson. So she's here, and we want to network with her. We want to dialogue with her because she knows the student body at her high school more than we ever will. And she's a valuable resource. So we've got a dialogue and network. Then we do strategy and engage. And we're testing, we're piloting, we're brainstorming, we're immersing, we're learning, we're using reason. This is the Wesley Quadrilateral. The Wesleyan theologians. We use reason, tradition, experience, and scripture, and it goes up, and Jesus is the center, and we highly value entrepreneurs, people that are prophetic, people who are apostolic, and innovation. This model has proven to be a really good way to think through this. And as my new friend Derek, my new American-Canadian friend, her husband, said, this is rinse and repeat. It's a rinse and repeat model. You don't do this once. You do it over and over and over and over again. Every time you come up, like God nudges you about one more thing, you do this model again. You pray about it, ask a lot of questions, go into a network dialoguing, and then you create a strategy. It's so tempting because we live in a McDonald's culture to go from here to here. Don't do it. Churches ask me all the time, just give me the 10-week curriculum. And I say, no, there is no 10-week curriculum. I don't believe in the 10-week curriculum because I want you to go through this process. What this does is it creates a community. It creates a community out of those who are involved in the process. And it creates a mission, not a program. And we've got to think that way. So Annie and Ginger are really the experts of this. They're really the ones who are showing us how it's done. So Annie, why don't you tell us how you got involved in the journey and talk to us about what's going on in Greenville and how it relates to that model. I'll put that model back up there.
So I'm Annie. I am a social worker. Heard about trafficking from a speaker in chapel from International Justice Missions. It broke my heart. At that time, it was very much focused on it's an over there problem, but it still, it broke my heart. I said, wow, I've got to do something about it. So started pursuing that. I went to grad school to get my master's in social work, contacted IJM, and they said, we don't need American social workers. You can give us money. So kind of felt crushed at that point, but at that point my eyes were starting to open to the fact that it was going on in Chicago where I was living at the time. And but still did not have a full framework of what it was. I was working in foster care, so I could see bits and pieces of it, but still did not fully understand. So prayer, right? So I kept praying and just longing for this this idea to come to fruition because I just felt like the Lord tugging at me. So living in Chicago, I've got, we're obviously going to get immersed in this and I can get plugged in Chicago. And about 4 years ago, my husband got a job in Greenville, Illinois, population 7,000, and as a football coach. So we moved to Greenville, and I thought, well, I guess the door is closed at that point with trafficking because trafficking is obviously not happening in a small town. Clueless, right? Oh gosh, I amazed myself at how naive I was. So worked there. I was working as a therapist at the hospital doing counseling with older adults, and still felt this tugging at my heart. I've got to do something, but I'm in Greenville. I can't do anything. And so was talking to a good friend of mine about this, and she said, oh my gosh, you've got to meet Ginger Coakley. She is working with trafficking in Illinois. And I said, well, what part of Illinois? Greenville. Shut up. So I'm like, all right, give me her information. So I got into contact with Ginger, and her immediate response was, well, what are you doing? And I said, well, I'm a social worker, I'm doing therapy with older adults. They're not being trafficked, thankfully. So she and I started dialoguing about what that looks like, what does my role look like in that, and so I started working with her just nights and weekends when I had time to put on events like concerts and movie series and just having conversations with people. And so then November of last year, just really again felt even more of a tugging from the Lord. And so I had been praying for about 3 to 4 months about, just felt like God was telling me to do something. And I was like, I'm ready, I'll do it, just tell me what to do, right? So I got to the point in November that I was desperate. I did a 24-hour fasting from talking or any kind of noise. Thankfully my husband was out of town, so that made it easier. So did this fasting, and again just felt like the Lord saying, I want you to do something. I kept saying, what? And he said, well, I've given you the desire to fight trafficking. And I was like, well, yeah, so I'm doing it, right? He said, no, I want you to do this full time. So in January, I quit my job at the hospital, joined in with Ginger in Greenville, and hit the ground running. So I will say prayer has to be huge. Had you told me a couple years ago that I would be doing this, that I would be speaking to people, I would laugh in your face because I hate speaking in front of people. So prayer is the process of getting ready. It's the process of the Lord working on you, because if we jump into this before the Lord's got us ready, we're going to be a hot mess. So we as a community, we have really saturated this in prayer. We meet every Monday morning at 7 a.m. at a local coffee shop and we pray. And we invite anybody to come. We just want to be in constant prayer, and we have seen God work in incredible ways. Prayers have been answered. Things that we did not even know that we needed have come in. We also did a 12-hour prayer at a local, it's called the Simple Room. They work with kind of the local at-risk youth. And so we said, well, that's great. They are doing the prevention work, so we want to use their location. So we spent 12 hours there praying, and just through that had a lot of stories come in of parents who were, their kids went to the Simple Room telling us that their kids had disappeared over the years. So we're praying, right? We're getting ready. We're ready for the Lord. At that point, still not really sure what that looks like in Greenville, but we're trying to learn. We're trying to get ready. So then, so we started asking questions. Ginger and I are both fairly new to Greenville. Most people in Greenville are born, bred, and raised, and generation after generation. So Ginger and I, being fairly new, started asking those questions. What's going on? What are the needs of the community? Let's get to know the community. We formed a task force, so we have about 12-member task force. It's Ginger and I, and then we've got a professor at the college. The school social worker is on there. We've got a victim advocate. We've got a pastor, a digital arts media person, a nurse. I'm forgetting. We've got an awesome task force. So we started doing that, right? So we started going out, having conversations with people. What's going on? What do we need in Greenville to address this? Because if we address the issues that are feeding into this, then we can tackle it in a much more effective way. So as we started talking, we started networking. We heard this constant need of, we need education, right? People don't know what's going on. And Ginger had already been doing some incredible work just educating people. And so we just started saying yes to everything. We became known as the Yes Girls, because if somebody came up and said, hey, will you talk to my youth group? Yes. We don't even need to finish that conversation. Tell us when and where. So we started talking with people, but then also educating people in what we were learning. So going to schools, going to health departments, going to churches, going to hospitals, law enforcement, just trying to spread that knowledge. And so as we're learning, we're passing that on. And as we're passing it on, we're also going back and learning even more and making sure that we're educated and smart in that. So then, our task force, we're dreaming, right? And we're wanting to move this forward and really take this to the next level. So in May, we had a training. We had the U.S. Assistant State's Attorney in Illinois, Monica Stump, came. She has been tasked to prosecute human trafficking in Southern Illinois. That is her sole job. So she is incredible. She came, she spoke, she trained. We had a guy from ICE. He came and spoke about kind of the investigative side as well as the labor trafficking. And then we had a woman that's working with victims. So they came and people gave about half of their day and came and they were trained on what this is. We had pastors, we had social workers, we had media, we had students, stay-at-home moms. I mean, we just had a conglomerate of about 60 people that came out from this small town and gave their time to learn. And so then after that, that just exploded. People were like, oh my gosh, this is here, let's talk. And so, and as we were doing these education pieces, I'm not kidding, stories were coming more and more. It was like every week or so, we had a new story of a local story in Greenville. I recently spoke to a group of 20 social workers, and afterwards they identified 12 current cases that they were working with that were victims of trafficking. And this is Southern Illinois, you know. So we're doing all of this, right? We're interpreting, we're brainstorming of what this needs to look like. Then Kevin shows up in June, and you guys just listen to him. He's inspiring, he's awesome. So he shows up to our task force and he says, wow, you guys are networked, you've got the ear of the community is ready to move, the community is ready to act. Let's do something. And so we are in the process, the very baby stages of opening a safe house and trying to learn what that looks like. So we've been traveling to different homes to make sure that we see how it's done and how it's done well, how it's effective. We do not at all want to be one of those stories of the safe houses that crashes, because the last thing I want to do is bring a girl in and then hurt her again as we shut the doors. So we want to make sure that we are as equipped and ready for that. So that's also a part of getting the community ready to accept them. Where are they going to go to church? Where are they going to go to school? Where are they going to go grocery shopping? And are the neighbors ready to accept these girls, embrace these girls, and care for them well? We don't want them to be a project. We want them to be us, right? Because this is not us and you, this is us. We are all one step away from being in their shoes. And so that's part of it. We're learning and growing towards that. We've also started taking groups of college students. We have a truck stop in Greenville, and we have heard reports from our police as well as the staff at the truck stop that there's girls that come and work the truck stop. So we're going out at night and handing out information and talking with the truckers to make sure that they've got Truckers Against Trafficking, awesome organization. So we go in as Truckers Against Trafficking. We don't want to mix the messages and confuse them. So we give them Truckers Against Trafficking material with the hotline, give them the tools so that they can then go out across the country and actually make a difference. What else have we done? Gosh. So we've got that. We have groups of college students going to the Simple Room that I told you about, as well as the Zone, which is another similar program about 20 minutes away, because we want to do the prevention work. We're getting in with those kids. We're doing the big brother, big sister types of programs so that those kids have eyes and ears on them. The traffickers are going to back away the minute that they notice I'm watching. They're not involved. One cool story, so my husband, I told you, is a football coach. He is the football coach at the college, so he's got 100 football players. So this summer we were talking and praying together, and he said, Annie, you're doing the awareness, you're doing the restoration, I'm doing the prevention. I'm going to send out 100 guys who knows what it means to be a man and knows how to treat a woman with respect and dignity, and we're going to cut off this addiction to pornography. So we are constantly going through this process. I could tell lots of awesome stories. God's just exploding and working and blessing all of us.
Well, the thing I want to point out is that Ginger started on this road about 2 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago. She confesses that at the time she started, she knew nothing about this. There was just a real energy in motion. But she didn't really, and she had a biblical sensitivity to justice. So that was it. So from 2.5 years ago till now, she went from all alone trying to figure it out, and then I came alongside of her, to then having an incredible co-partner and an incredible team that really is all of these elements of society are engaging now in Greenville. And they've spent 2 years doing this model, creating this model, and now they have a community which has a mission. And if we could replicate this in every community, we would have incredible transformation going on. And that's really the hope and the desire that we have in the Set Free movement. And it's not just us, there are other people that are really advocating this kind of approach. There's a book by Hunter, it's called the Tragedy and Hope of Christianity in the Late Modern World. He's a professor at the University of Virginia, but a lot of the stuff that he's got in there is about the influencers of society and how we've got to tap into the elites that can really drive this forward. So they've really done a great job, and the hope that of their example is that I think anybody can do it. Anybody can do it. You just have to have enough time, and you've got to trust that God's going to lead you, and you've got to be able to network with others to pull others into that group. And that's what Ginger did. She just started pulling others in, and then God sent Annie, who was this great new ally with a category of smartness that Ginger doesn't have, because Annie's a trained social worker. She's actually got a degree, and she's in the field. So now she's a great ally with Ginger. You have a question?
Yeah, she mentioned that there was only about 7,000 in your community.
Yeah.
So how would you work this with a much larger community? I mean, in ours, we're working in Metro Detroit, and so it's a little bit harder. I mean, we have good working relationships with local people, but in every day we're trying to network even greater. But
Yeah.
how would you recommend getting out there with a much larger community such as ours?
I mean, I would say one thing that we've done that can be replicable. Most counties will have an interagency meeting. I don't know if they'd probably call it something else, but where all the agencies come together once a quarter or once a month and they meet. That's how a lot of this exploded, because I just started showing up to those, and I would say, "Hey, I'm Annie, fighting human trafficking," and then people were like, "What the crap? Let's talk." So through that, then hospitals were saying,
Right.
"Can you come talk and educate our people?"
Okay.
And then, like one story we have the Safe Educators, Sexual Assault, Family Emergencies.
We have that.
So they heard us come talk, and we have been praying about, wow, we got to get into the schools because we got to educate our kids, right? And so, but Ginger and I are only 2 people. Our task force is overworked and exhausted. So we're like, we don't know how to get, and I can tell you this message, but it's a whole different ballpark to talk to kids about this, right? So we have been praying about that. So SAFE was at one of those interagency meetings, and they were like, so we go into the schools and we have a program. We talk about healthy relationships, domestic violence, all this stuff, but we would like to talk about human trafficking.
Right.
So we trained them, gave them 3 hours of a training, and now they're out in 7 counties, not just Greenville, 7 counties. So part of it's just like kind of getting a foot in the door with one of those agencies, and then they can take it far beyond what we can do. So I would say look for meetings like that.
I'm from Seattle, which is a large metropolitan area. The Attorney General has a once-a-month meeting where everybody that's involved in this issue comes together for about 2 hours once a month, and we have conversations. And then out of that grew another organization called Seattle Against Slavery. And Seattle Against Slavery is just a collaborative fraternity of groups that are involved. So there are ways to do it, but what I would say too is I would say you start with your community, and that's not the whole city of Detroit. That is that suburb neighborhood thing that you call wherever you are, and you drill down and you create this there, and then as you create it, you're networking and partnering, and so then all of a sudden there's another church over here who's doing that, and then you can link together, and pretty soon it becomes this Lego city of abolition. And
that's kind of what we have right now. It's just, I feel like it's hard to keep everything in line and check when it's like, oh, we got someone over here and someone over there, someone up in northern Michigan, and
Right.
so.
Can you meet regularly? I mean, I know it's a lot to ask those people, but we don't wanna reinvent the wheel, so if somebody up
Exactly.
north is doing something awesome, then let's send everybody that needs that there.
I know
And
there are, and we're part of, there's a Michigan network for people that are in this kind of outreach, cause what we do is strip club outreach, and so there's an online network for people who are in this and trying to meet online, so, something.
Yeah. Just staying connected so you're supporting each other, so you're not getting burned out and trying to reduplicate, yeah.
That's awesome. Do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I didn't know, I might have missed this when I was writing, but you talked about the prayer group that meets, and do you have a church too that's another body that's helping hold you up?
We
I'm wondering
are,
about the role of any local churches.
Here we've got two models. My model is that the Free Methodist Church is really championing this. They've created a position, so I've got this huge yes coming from the denomination. But Annie and Ginger, who are also Free Methodists, that they have gone into a community where they were basically unknown and are trying to start it from scratch. And they do have the support, but not necessarily the partnership of several different churches. And that is challenging. And there are different ways to kind of understand that. Some churches are really blessed with incredible leaders like Pastor Mark Van Valen at Spring Arbor Free Methodist Church, who really has a missional heart and is really a great communicator, and that church is doing incredible things. But then other churches, they either don't have that level of leadership or they're distracted by other things, and so it becomes a much more difficult process. John Wesley said, if you set yourself on fire, people will come from miles around to watch you burn. And so Ginger and Annie have kind of done that in Greenville. Let's set ourselves on fire, and rather than going in and asking churches to partner with us, those churches are going to see that we're on fire and all these women are coming out of prostitution and we're engaging in all these different ways. Who wouldn't want to be involved with that? So there's kind of a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach, and you've got to do both. It's kind of a both and. Okay. Any other questions?
More comment.
Yeah.
Some people have pegged this movement as a fad, you know, and you talked about burning out, like you know, having this great idea and then burning out. I like how thorough you're being with everything. I think what's hard is that this is really messy work, and people want to claim that they've saved someone from trafficking, and there's more people willing to work with girls who've been trafficked than in the prevention work, because you can't, if you don't feel so great, like, oh, I really prevented that, you don't know if you did or not.
Yeah.
So it's messy in that people want the story of the speaker today and to be part of that transformation, and you can burn out because you're not always going to see that. It's hard work. Yeah.
One thing that Ginger talks about a lot that I really respect, so the verse, do justice, love mercy. So we are called to that, right? Justice is a way of living. And so if I stand here and I talk about we've got to pursue justice, and then I go home and I eat a Hershey's bar, not going to work. Mercy is where I feel good. I did a program, or I donated, or I volunteered a couple hours, and I feel good about that, and then I can go home and go on with my life. But if I'm pursuing justice, and that's good, we need that, right? But we've got to live life different, because we are going to burn out, and these programs are going to burn out. But if we are changing the very core of how we live and why we do what we do and how we think, then it's going to be long-lasting and much more effective than just patting myself on the back and feeling good that I saved that girl, because chances are she's going to go back, and it's not a...
And we don't save anybody.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
We don't have anything to do with saving anybody. We don't rescue anybody. God saves, God rescues, God restores. And one of the other points to this that we didn't get into, but when I talk to churches want to talk about sex trafficking more than they want to talk about labor trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
Because sex trafficking is sexy,
Yeah.
and it's really, like, I'm Liam Neeson, I'm gonna go in with a gun, I'm gonna rescue that poor girl, and it's gonna be great. And like, for me, full disclosure here, if I only look at sex trafficking, I can completely excuse my participation in slavery because I don't do porn and I don't buy sex. So does that mean I don't have anything to do with slavery? But when you talk about lifestyle and the fact that I could be wearing slavery, eating slavery, talking on a product created by slavery, then that demands a lifestyle change, which is different from an emotional response of wanting to save somebody. And that's a deeper, much more difficult work than, and that gets at what you're saying about and I talk about the difference between charity and justice. Charity, you throw money or prayers at something, and it's here today, gone tomorrow, but justice is a lifestyle commitment, it's a mission. So yeah, and our churches are really caught up in this because our churches are very much geared to programs, charity, and emotion, and not geared towards lifestyle and mission. We're really off track, and that's a totally different story.
We come from a military town, and through the years when the military comes up, and we know that they bring women from Detroit or from Traverse City or Grand Rapids or wherever. And because it's a military thing, I think it's even more hidden than it would be in a regular town. Because the cops are gonna turn their backs, everybody turns their backs to it.
Yeah.
So, for us to try and make this awareness to everybody, it's very difficult because we've had people say to us, well, that doesn't happen here. Yeah. And, it's almost like they don't wanna deal with it.
Yeah.
Because, we can't hurt our military guys, we can't do this, we can't, So that part of it, you throw that into the mix, and it really makes it difficult for anybody to admit that this stuff is going on there.
And that's why this upper left-hand corner is so vitally important, because you can't have the conversation unless you've got the data. You've got to have the data. You got to be able to say, oh no, there were 27 arrests last month in our county for human trafficking. Well, where did you find that? Well, I got it from the police, or I got it from the county, and you're only going to find the information if you're asking the questions. And so just like Annie was saying, as they have done the questions and the networking and dialoguing, they've learned. You were just saying that in this workshop with social workers, you were able to identify 12 potential victims or people that were pretty much identified as victims of human trafficking. That would not have happened if she had not been in dialogue, and if she had not been asking questions, and if she had just been reading a book in her home or praying about it, that would not have happened. But now that she's got it, she can use that, and that's power.
We don't even have to look for it, they're giving it to us.
Yeah.
They're telling us it's happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you can't just do one of these things. You got to do them all, and then it's rinse and repeat. You go back through it again. You think that's where they're at. They're like, okay, we've done this art walk thing, and we've done this engagement with the university, but now we're going into should we go into the prisons? And now they're back here again. They want to do it, and they think they're going to do it, but they're not sure. But they're going to start here first, and then they're going to move up. They're asking lots of questions. They're creating the networks, and then they'll go into the prisons. But they won't go into the prisons until they've done all of these. Yeah.
Going back to what you had said about the lifestyle and the Hershey bar and what we're wearing, are there resources that tell us?
Yeah.
And you can find them on my website. Okay. You go to the 30 Ways. There's the Free to Work app that you can get, and there's the World Vision Australia's Guide to Ethical Shopping PDF that you can download. There's a new group called Made in a Free World. That's not on my website, but it's because it's new and they're still working out the kinks. I tried to use their app last night.
Free to work is with the number 2.
Yeah, and you can find those on the website. But you know what? The most powerful thing about it, the most powerful tool you have, is asking questions. I went in to buy new tires for my car, and I asked the woman, how do I know that these tires don't have slavery in them? She went, what? And I said, well, there are slaves in the world that are tapping the rubber trees and part of this process. She said, I don't know what you're talking about. And so we have this dialogue. Now, what if 10 people a week had that conversation with her? All of a sudden, she would be going to her manager and saying, dude, there are people coming in, I don't know what is going on. Are there slaves that I don't know about? And they're not buying this one kind of tire because they're saying there's slavery involved in it, and we're seeing our sales decrease, you know? So the manager's wrestling with it, then he gets to the owner, then all of a sudden, change happens. Change happens because we're asking a question. How simple is that? Like, you do not have to have a university degree. You don't have to have your theology right to ask a question. Where does this tomato come from? Where do these blueberries come from? Where does this tire come from? Ask questions. Yeah.
Just a quick comment. It's similar to, well, at least in Canada, with what was going on in Africa with the diamonds. For a long time, people would ask, where did these diamonds come from? And show me this, because I am not buying blood diamonds.
Yeah.
So
And we're all going to be able to do that in our country in June of 2014 in regards to our phones. A new law has come into effect as of June 2014. You can go into Verizon or AT&T and say, show me Apple's proof of where they buy the minerals for their phones. Show me Droid, whatever, Android, whatever. They have to declare, they have to show where they've gotten the minerals so that we can eliminate conflict minerals that are in all of our smartphones. Now, how did that happen? It happened because people like you have demanded it. If nobody cared, they wouldn't be doing it. Yeah.
So I'm majoring in chemistry here, and I was wondering, like, in what ways that incorporates with this, with the prevention and education, and I mean, like, you can tell people about what's going on, but how do you, like, follow through, and how do you provide for teenagers in that aspect?
What year are you?
I'm a freshman.
Okay, so you're going to write a whole bunch of research papers in the next 4 years, and so you can channel this question into your research papers and explore how does, and you can partner with a professor like Mary back here who can help you to kind of define, well, what does that look like? But I would say in general that you are on the front lines, that as young people they feel ugly, they feel undervalued, they're frustrated, they're confused, they run away from home, you have an opportunity to step into the gap and say, you are lovely, here's a safe place for you. My youth group is a safe place for you. And I will not tolerate any bullying, I won't tolerate any sexism, and my door is always open to you. You've got a problem, you can call me at midnight, and I will talk to you. Please do not run away, and please be valued. So I think our youth workers have an incredible opportunity. You're right on the front lines of helping to prevent young people from being abused in whatever way and then running to the streets. This is hugely preventative. What you're doing is huge. And it's more important for us to equip you than it is to create task forces like in Greenville, because we're way behind the ball. We shouldn't be spending millions of dollars on safe houses. We should be spending millions of dollars on youth workers who are helping to stop the flow of vulnerable youth onto the streets.
So when we set up like a task force or something similar in a town, it's like you were saying, it's important to like network and have somebody from the police department and somebody in the schools and just people from everywhere. But at least from my experience talking to these people, like they're all spread really thin with like this social cause and this social cause and this social cause. How would, I guess, you guys suggest that we explain to them the importance of human trafficking in general and why that should be something that they should put extra time into on top of all these other things that they're trying to stop?
Because Jesus died on the day that
They were reading the streets.
What would you say?
I would say a couple things. A, this is not just a cause. This is a human rights issue, this is a social justice issue, this is a criminal justice issue, this is a health issue, I mean, this is a family issue, it incorporates all of that. So it's not just another a cause. But I would also, what we try to do with our task force is really champion what they're doing. And so the school social worker, man, okay, what do you need? And we're gonna send people to you because you're on the front lines, you're doing the work, and so we're gonna support that. We're not just asking for your time, we wanna learn from you and then champion you and support you. And so the simple room, okay, what are you doing? Okay, now we are throwing college students at you to make sure that it is done well and it can continue, so that their load is lightened. We don't wanna add work to their load.
And this is the difference, again, I'm getting back to this, there's a difference between a program and a mission. A program demands more and more from people, but a mission is integrated into what's already going on. Because in order to address this issue, every one of the social problems have to be addressed. And everybody that's working on a social problem is a valuable ally. So if somebody's working to alleviate homelessness, I'm not ever gonna ask them, well, quit doing that and come join us. It's like, how do we help you to be more effective? Because if you're more effective, we're more effective. And how do we help to resource you? And how do we work together? That's really the goal. It's not about us. It's about the mission. And the mission is bigger than modern slavery. The mission is shalom. And shalom is the healing and wholeness of our world and our society. And on that hopeful note, we are out of time. Thank you.